foreign agricultural product coming into America, and our farmers are going to have a field day right now. Have a lot of fun. I love you too.
Right now, American farmers are harvesting a nightmare. Fields full of crops and not a single buyer in sight. Silos are bursting at the seams, dairy shipments are rotting on docks, and China just walked away. In just 6 weeks, U.S. farm exports to China plummeted 28%. For sorghum growers, it's even worse, at a 94.4% free fall. That's not a dip, that's a collapse. And while Washington stays silent, farmers are facing an impossible choice: harvest at a loss or watch everything they've built turn to dust. This isn't just a bad season, it's the unraveling of an entire industry, and it's happening in real time. The collapse was swift, brutal, and impossible to ignore. In just 6 weeks, U.S. farm exports to China plummeted by 28%, a number that doesn't just sting but signals a full-blown crisis. The worst hit: sorghum. Once a booming trade, now lying in ruins. Shipments crashed from 1.44 million metric tons in early 2023 to a pitiful 78,000 tons this year, a 94.4% freefall. According to the U.S., the reason is China's retaliatory tariffs, now exceeding 125%, have made American grain not just uncompetitive but commercially irrelevant in its biggest market. But sorghum is just the beginning. At the Port of Oakland, the heart of America's refrigerated farm exports, almond and dairy shipments dropped by 40%. Trucks sit idle, containers stack up with nowhere to go, and the hardest truth buyers aren't coming back. China has already moved on, locking in long-term deals with Brazil and Argentina, deals that took years to build and won't be undone overnight. The damage isn't limited to one crop or one port. Hay exporters in Washington are laying off a quarter of their workforce because orders vanished overnight. One supplier described it bluntly: one day the contracts were there, the next, silence. The same story echoes across industries. Soybean futures dropped 14% in early 2025 as China's imports from Brazil surged 25%. This isn't a temporary slump, it's a permanent rewrite of global trade. Washington's response? Symbolic, not structural. Promises of farmer relief sound hollow when the real problem, market access, is ignored. The White House insists the trade war will bring leverage, but the numbers scream otherwise. Before the tariffs, China bought over 90% of U.S. sorghum exports. Now that pipeline is severed, and no bailout can stitch it back together. The question isn't just what's lost, it's what's next. With every canceled shipment, every abandoned cargo ship, the U.S. loses more ground. Brazil didn't replace American soybeans in a day. It took years of subsidies, port upgrades, and strategic deals. Now those deals are sealed, and if Washington thinks tariffs can be flipped like a light switch, they're ignoring the cold, hard math. Farmers can't survive on patriotism alone. The crisis at America's farms is now rippling outward, hitting the ports that serve as the lifeblood of agricultural trade. The Port of Oakland, the nation's top gateway for refrigerated farm exports, is buckling under the weight of China's retaliatory tariffs. Cargo volumes have plummeted, and the slowdown isn't just about idle ships, it's about livelihoods vanishing overnight. Dock workers, truckers, and warehouse staff are feeling the sting as exports dry up. The port's unique 50-50 balance between imports and exports makes it especially vulnerable, and with China accounting for 29% of its total trade, the damage is spreading fast. Containers that should be packed with almonds, dairy, and beef are sitting empty. Contracts are being canceled mid-transit, leaving exporters scrambling to reroute shipments if they can. One hay supplier in Washington laid off 25% of its workforce in just 2 weeks after orders collapsed. Another exporter watched helplessly as 6,400 metric tons of wood pulp sat frozen in warehouse limbo, racking up demurrage fees while waiting for new buyers. A shipment of 90 metric tons already at sea, bound for China, now faces outright abandonment. The math is brutal. With freight costs soaring and no buyers willing to pay the inflated prices, shipping at a loss is the only option. Until it isn't. The problem isn't just lost sales, it's the unraveling of an entire supply chain built over decades. Since the latest round of tariffs hit, 68 scheduled sailings have been canceled, a phenomenon known as blank sailings in the industry. Each canceled voyage means more than just a missed delivery. It means trucks without loads, cranes without work, and workers without paychecks. Port executives warned that the slowdown isn't just a temporary hiccup, it's a structural shift. We can't absorb these costs forever, one exporter said. At some point the shipments just stop. The pain isn't limited to Oakland. Across the country, agricultural exporters are facing the same nightmare: rising fees, vanishing demand, and no clear path forward. The U.S. government's new port fees, $1.5 million per Chinese vessel, were supposed to pressure Beijing, but they're backfiring. While bulk agricultural shipments were exempt, containerized goods like beef, poultry, and dairy weren't so lucky. These high-value exports make up 55% of U.S. farm export earnings, and now they're being squeezed even harder. The ripple effect is undeniable. When a single hay supplier lays off workers, it doesn't just hurt those employees, it hurts the trucking companies that hauled their product, the equipment dealers who sold them machinery, and the small towns that depended on those paychecks. The longer this drags on, the more permanent the damage becomes. Ports can't pivot overnight, buyers won't wait forever, and with every week that passes, the U.S. loses more of its foothold in global agriculture. The question isn't whether the trade war is hurting farmers, it's how much of the industry will be left when it's over. The checks are coming just like they did last time. The White House has floated another round of farm bailouts, a band-aid solution for a crisis that needs surgery. But across the heartland, farmers aren't celebrating. They've seen this playbook before. Bailouts might keep the lights on for another season, but they don't reopen closed markets, rebuild shattered contracts, or undo the trust lost with buyers overseas. In Iowa, corn farmers are planting fields knowing they'll lose money. In Kentucky, some are debating whether to harvest at all. This isn't farming for profit anymore, it's triage. The government's response? More cash injections, more short-term fixes. But what farmers are begging for isn't money, it's markets. Without buyers, without trade routes, without stable demand, even the biggest bailout is just delaying the inevitable. The frustration has reached a breaking point. Major farm groups, from the National Farmers Union to the American Soybean Association, are doing something unprecedented. They're uniting against Washington's trade war tactics. For the first time in years, these organizations are backing legislation to strip the White House of unchecked tariff powers, demanding congressional oversight on trade decisions. Their message is clear. The current approach isn't just failing, it's making things worse. And the numbers prove it. Retaliatory tariffs from China, Canada, and the EU haven't just dented exports. They've flooded the U.S. market with unsold inventory, crashing prices. When China abruptly canceled a 12,000-ton pork order, its largest since 2020, it wasn't just a lost sale. It was perishable product with nowhere to go, rotting in storage. Meanwhile, corporate food processors and distributors are raking in record profits, while the farmers growing the actual crops are squeezed between rising costs and collapsing income. The cruel irony: tariffs were supposed to protect American farmers. Instead, they've handed more power to the middlemen. Small and mid-sized farms are being pushed toward insolvency, while agribusiness giants adapt by shifting supply chains elsewhere. The system is rigged, and the proof is in the prices. Consumer food costs have spiked nearly 18% year over year, but farm incomes keep falling. Washington's policies aren't shielding agriculture. They're accelerating its consolidation into fewer, bigger hands. There's a deeper betrayal here. For decades, U.S. farm policy encouraged overproduction while depending on global markets to absorb the surplus. Now that those markets are slipping away, the entire model is collapsing. Over 40% of American soy, corn, and wheat growers admit they can't break even without export contracts. Bailouts won't fix that, neither will empty promises about winning a trade war. The real cost of this trade war won't be measured in quarterly losses or this year's failed harvests. It'll be counted in the years, maybe decades, it takes to claw back what's being destroyed right now. Trust. Buyers don't just want crops, they want reliability. And with every canceled contract, every shipment abandoned at sea, the message to the world is clear. America's agricultural supply chain is no longer dependable. China's pivot to Brazil tells the whole story. This wasn't some snap decision. It took 3 years of Brazilian port upgrades, government-backed financing, and deliberate shifts in trade routes to replace American soybeans. Now that those deals are locked in, reversing them would mean competing against a system built specifically to exclude the U.S. and doing it from a position of weakness. Global markets don't wait for countries to figure out their trade policies. Once a buyer moves on, they rarely come back. The damage is already visible in rural America. Banks in farm-heavy counties are reporting the early warning signs of a credit crunch: rising loan defaults, tightening lines of credit, and nervous lenders. Farmers who spent years building relationships with overseas buyers Now watch as those same buyers sign decade-long contracts with competitors in South America. "You can't bail out trust," one grain exporter muttered after his third canceled deal this season. He's right. Money might keep farms afloat temporarily, but it doesn't rebuild the networks that took generations to establish. And the clock is ticking. Every month without a course correction deepens the structural shift. Take sorghum, for example. Before the tariffs, China bought over 90% of U.S. exports. Now that market is virtually gone. Soybeans are following the same path, with China's imports from Brazil surging 25% while U.S. prices tank. These aren't minor adjustments, they're wholesale changes in how the world sources food. And with each passing season, American farmers become less relevant to the global market. The most painful irony is that this was avoidable. Decades of U.S. farm policy encouraged overproduction while outsourcing price stability to foreign buyers. Now, with those buyers walking away, the entire system is exposed. Nearly half of American grain growers admit they can't break even without exports. Yet, Washington keeps doubling down on the same failed strategies: tariffs, bailouts, and empty promises. This isn't just about lost sales, it's about losing the foundation of an industry. When trust erodes, markets don't just shrink, they vanish. And once they're gone, no amount of political speeches or emergency checks will bring them back. The question isn't whether farmers will survive this year, it's whether American agriculture will still have a seat at the table when the dust settles. Right now, the world is moving on, with or without us. This isn't about tariffs anymore. It's not about political posturing or short-term bailouts. What's happening in America's Farm Belt is a fight for survival, the kind that won't be solved with temporary checks or empty promises. The numbers tell the story. Collapsing exports, abandoned shipments, and entire supply chains unraveling. But behind those numbers are real people. Farmers watching a lifetime of work evaporate, port workers losing jobs, and rural towns bracing for economic freefall. Washington keeps treating this like a trade dispute that can be won or lost. That's a dangerous illusion. Trade wars don't end with surrender, they end with broken systems and reshaped markets. China isn't just buying less from the U.S., it's building new trade routes that exclude American farmers entirely. Brazil, Argentina, and other competitors aren't temporary replacements. They're the new normal. Every day without a real solution cements that reality further. The stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about economics, it's about food security, rural livelihoods, and America's place in the global economy. Farmers don't need another bailout. They need what they've been begging for: open markets, stable trade policies, and a government that doesn't treat agriculture as a bargaining chip. Without that, no amount of money will stop the decline. If this crisis in America's farmlands shocked you, hit that like button because the world needs to see what's really happening. Share this video with anyone who cares about food security, rural communities, or the future of American agriculture. And subscribe to our channel. We're breaking down the stories corporate media ignores, and we won't stop holding power accountable. The trade war isn't just a headline. Don't let Washington silence this conversation. Tap subscribe now and stay informed.